Uh, Come on. This YouTube machine is working slowly. Good morning, YouTube folks. Here we go.
I guess that's Darth Vader. James Earl Jones week.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Right, that's tweeted out. Let's
This
get this going.
this is CNN.
Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Friday, September the 13th, a little after 9:20 a.m. We're not to Halloween, but we hit a Friday the 13th, Scott Docterman from The Athletic. I saw the original in a drive-in movie theater. You talk about old, that's old. I'm old. I saw that. I think my friend's name was Dan, and his mom and dad took us to this thing. And I was young, and yeah, it made an impression.
I would bet. How old were you? Probably like 13 or something. I mean,
Yeah, I was young. Yeah, and that was that genre then, right? With Halloween
yes.
and The Exorcist. I mean, there were some classics that came out then. That was the golden age of horror movies, really, I think.
Oh, for sure. And I was just young enough to get all the commercials, but not be 13, but be like 6 and 7 years old. And I mean, you think about it. I was probably about 2.5 or 3 when Jaws came out. And if you're that old, and all of a sudden you hear dur, 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 and you see a shark attacking people, I mean that leaves an impression. And then of course you had Halloween, and then you had Friday the 13th. It's like,
Texas
us.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre may have been the first of those, was it?
It was like
all
72. It was like
yeah,
72 or something
yeah,
like that. And then there was like this big explosion of horror genre, in
yep.
the late 70s to the mid 80s. And being, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old and seeing those commercials, it's like, man, no wonder us Gen Xers that are are so traumatized by everything. It's like, you're seeing these, and then of course you're going to the movies.
Yeah, and then Freddy's coming along down
Yeah.
the street. There was that decade, man. Decade plus was a good run. And Friday
Yeah.
the 13th was right there. One of the most popular franchises. Obviously, most of the franchises got ridiculous
Yeah.
after
They did
maybe
too.
one or two.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the classics. Halloween is probably a top 10 movie for me overall, all time. I love it.
I tell you, the first Friday the 13th was like, this makes sense, totally. And then it kind of went off, jumped the shark, if you will, but the second one was wild. I mean, let me, not to spoil it for anybody who hadn't seen it since it's only been out for 42 years or whatever. But when, the girl's running and then she puts the mom's head on her head,
Yeah.
at when I was like 8 years old, that leaves an impression, man.
Yeah. And that was like, people now will be like, yeah, big deal. But we didn't have video games and stuff like that back then that were as graphic, so
Yeah.
to speak, or movies like that. So different time, different era, different age. But yeah, hopefully Friday the 13th is good to everybody this year. Um, and
Yeah.
and we'll see where we go from here in terms of Iowa football, Scott. I really don't have a transition from horror movies to
No,
Iowa
no
football.
segue on this.
No segue.
No faces of death while we're at it.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, you're talking about
yeah, I'm never
sick,
watching that again. Yeah.
sick. But last week, I think we opened and I said, is the Iowa offense fixed after what we saw in the second half of a 40-0 win against Illinois State in the opening week? Now I ask you, is it broken still? Or how much work needs to be done here moving forward? Because there really isn't, I wrote about this and we can talk about the quarterback situation. I'm not worried about the defense, by the way, and we'll get into that more later as well. I don't have much concern there. This comes down to the offense and the quarterback, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that today. But just coming out of that game, and I don't know if you've had a chance to rewatch, how concerned are you knowing that after this week, it's at Minnesota, bye week at Ohio State? This offense does not have any more time.
it's if you can split it up, I feel pretty good about the running game. I think the running game is I'm not going to go so far to say it's fixed, but I'd say I feel good about it.
Agreed.
The passing game, specifically quarterback, I'm really concerned about because I do think the receivers have made a lot of strides, Rob. I like what I've seen out of the receivers thus far. But when you look, and then first quarter, it was working well. 8 out of 11 for Cade for 72 yards. They were moving the ball any way they wanted to move it. They were taking it to Iowa State's defense. The last 3 quarters, 5 of 18, 2 interceptions, 27 yards. You're back to where you were last year. I mean, in the last 3 to 4 years, frankly. It's not good enough. And I don't know if it's, and Kirk is trying his best to shield Cade from it. Look, he's trying to get back into game shape. He's been out. That only works for so long, man. And you can't be this inconsistent. In his case, it's fundamental. His feet aren't set. He's not driving with his back, his step and throw, all that sort of stuff. And, so he's not accurate. Doesn't have a lot of arm strength. And there's right now, they aren't on the same page. And I do think the receivers are much better than what I've seen in the last couple of years. I like a lot what I've seen from Reese Vanderzee and Jacob Gill. I think Caleb Brown.
Gill. Yeah, both of those first 2 guys are surprises.
Yeah. I think Caleb Brown is going to be good when he's there. He's there now. And Seth Anderson's hard to say. But, I mean, I really like what I've seen out of them. They're like, okay. But the quarterback's got to get the ball to them in the right position. And I'm not seeing that right now. And I'm seeing some mistakes. So, he got away with one in the first week, that touchdown pass to Reese Vanderzee where he was, it was like a fall away jumper, and he threw it to a guy that was triple covered, but he had better athletic ability than the guys on the other team. As we saw the first play out of the second half, which I think the play call was bad, and I think the throw was bad, and the decision was the dumbest. It was you're rolling to your right, you're throwing left, up the left sideline, doesn't have a lot of arm strength. He put it in a position where only the other guy can intercept it, and he did, Darian Porter. That can't happen. If the guy's not open, drop it in the dirt or the rubber filament. So I'm off the charts concerned about the passing game. And it's not so much that they can't beat Minnesota with it. I think they can. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than one game. It's about this season. And at the end of the season, we want to sit here like we have the last couple of years and say, wow, if they only had a passing game, they'd be in the playoff. After a while, these types of things just run together. And this is the best opportunity they've really had to really put a statement and an exclamation point on this program. And with the passing game, they have it as it sits today, without growth or without change. It's going to be a really tough, frustrating year.
We've kind of gone through this process, Scott, as we've come through this off season of, spring football and watching Deacon and wondering what's going on there. And then adding, Brendan Sullivan coming in and us talking about, what is the dynamic here? What is, Kids Day, what the information was that we got out of Kids Day and how we process that. Being told during August that the competition is close, and we're wondering all along, and we're going to get to a quarterback controversy. And it's kind of simmered, I think, here for the last, 6 weeks-ish, so to speak, beginning of camp. But now we're in a spot where you have a loss. Like you said, the circumstances are you have a loss. The goal is to make it back to the Big Ten championship game and to make the college football playoff. At least one of those, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you hope for. You get to the Big Ten championship game, you're probably going to get in the playoff. But now there's no more time to let this play out. And this, I think, is really uncomfortable for Kirk. Because what do you do here? Do you let Sullivan play some in the first half this week, which I would do? I would at the very least, get him as a series, maybe 2, but give him an opportunity. See what he looks like in a game situation. That's what I would do. But Kirk's probably thinking, all right, if I do that, how is this going to impact Cade and his mindset? If I start letting these guys compete in a game. To me, I don't think you can worry about hurting Cade's feelings. If he's a good teammate, he understands. But I think Kirk's so afraid of disruption and division in his locker room. He's in a really tough spot now. I call it the quarterback conundrum because if you stick with Cade and you lose at Minnesota, it's over. This is a week at Troy. You got a chance to get a look at both of these guys. You should win this game. And we can talk a little bit about Troy. I will say this. They have 12 seniors, tied with Illinois for the fewest in the country. This is not the Troy that's won the last two Sun Belts, but we could talk a little bit more about that later. All right, I'm going to stop my dissertation here, Scott, and just say this is a sticky position to be in, but it's one that these coaches get paid a lot of money to do. They got to get this right. They've got to win at Minnesota.
Absolutely 1,000%, Rob. And even with bad quarterback play, they might be able to beat Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota is a good, capable team. If like we saw last year. When
you want to gamble on that, though,
exactly. But what I'm saying is that what does it matter? Okay, so they're 3-1, and then they get a week, and then they get to go to Ohio State, and they get obliterated. And you're like, well, I don't know if I want to switch quarterbacks before Ohio State. And you lose there with no matter who's the quarterback.
You can't drag your feet here.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, okay, Washington's at home. You can't do that because afterwards, there's not a lot of separation, Rob, between Iowa and Wisconsin and
agreed.
Probably Northwestern, maybe Washington. I mean, Washington's won some games. Certainly Nebraska is playing really well. There's not a lot of separation there. So don't risk it. I'm not outright saying bench Cade. And I'm not outright saying Brendan Sullivan's a better answer. But what I'm saying is the team deserves the best quarterback it can get.
Exactly.
It has an elite level defense. It had a couple of breakdowns last week. You can still win those games, even with breakdowns. You can't expect them to play perfectly on defense every single game, especially against NFL receivers.
And you know what, Scott? Other teams make good plays.
Yeah.
That can beat any defense. Exactly. And you tip your cap. But that wasn't the reason they lost to Iowa State.
Exactly. I mean, and there were a lot of coaching decisions we can go through too.
Yes.
On the goal line. But I do think that the quarterback is, for this season, somewhat existential. And not the fact that they're going to lose all their games, but the fact is, do you want to sit at the end of the season? We've been through these years too, Rob, where you had a lot of potential and you ended up 7-5. Yep. And you're like, God. And they lose 4 of those games by a touchdown or less. And it's because their quarterback play was mediocre at best. That's the potential you've got here. Do you want to end up in the Duke's Mayo Bowl? I mean, if you end up there, you end up there. But if you have 10-2 potential, reach your 10-2 potential. And I think the offensive line has been playing well. They've only allowed, 1 sack all year. They've ran the ball where they're averaging like 7 yards a carry. They're doing everything right up there. They have a tight end that they didn't connect with, who's going to be an NFL guy last week. They have an ascending receiver crew. They've got a running back right now who would be a household name if they won. And they've got all these pieces to make them a contender for this, except at quarterback. And I know Cade is, and I probably, in the past, I might have pulled some punches on this, with Spencer or before that. But now that we've entered the era of free agency and they're making significant money, it does behoove them to say, hey, you came here for a reason. And I understand you were hurt, but it doesn't look like you're connecting the way you need to connect. And I mean, make the makeables. You don't need to throw 60 yards down in the air. And, you missed the Caleb Brown throw. That sucked. But you can't miss some of the slants across the middle because you're throwing behind your receiver. And I think right now, as you said, the Troy game, what I would do here is I would say, Cade, you're starting the game. Brennan, you get the first real series starting in the second quarter through halftime. Just let him. And yep. Cade, you're still the starter. We want to see Brendan. And, in the second half, we'll just kind of play it by ear. And go with it that way, just because you don't know. I mean, Cade's been hurt the last 3 different seasons here. Well, not this season, I guess, yet, but you just don't know. So to me, I think the longer you piddle around with this, the more opportunity you have to go 7-5. And if we know anything about this fan base, Rob, it's not going to tolerate it, and it's going to get nasty. And next year is a 7-5 year based on all the turnover. This is a year you put all the chips on the table, and it's uncomfortable for Kirk. But there's that saying that they tell the players all the time: be comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, now it applies to the coaching staff.
It's interesting too, because Kirk loves to play the odds, right? He plays percentages. That's the way he kind of approaches the game. He wants to have an advantage. But when analyzing this quarterback situation, there's so much gray area here. And, if you buy into this is just Cade knocking off the rust, then you stick with him. But how do you know if that's the situation? Maybe he's just lost some speed on his fastball, so to speak. So then you also have, we have Brandon Sullivan. What's he look like in practice? Has he actually gone out and beaten Cade in practice? What does that look like? And we've talked about it before. The players in the locker room, you can't fool them. So they're seeing what's going on at practice. If you continue to run a guy out there that players don't think gives them the best chance to win, then you've got serious problems. So again, this is really uncomfortable and not Kirk's sweet spot, the area he wants to be in. Lean on Tim Lester here.
Mm-hmm.
This guy knows quarterbacks. This was a freaking college quarterback at the FBS level. What does he think? I would love to ask Tim Lester what he thinks, but we don't get that opportunity here. And I know you can only say so much publicly. It really matters what you do behind the scenes. But I really hope that Kirk allows this to be a group decision here. And again, you can't blame the guys for making a move or trying something different and it not working, because we don't know. Brendan Sullivan could go in there and stink, Scott. It's very possible.
Yeah.
And then you know that the guy behind him isn't the answer. But at least do it. Do something. Address what's going on and don't let it fester. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, from your perspective, watching Cade, can he get it back? Can he knock the rust off? Again, I know it's a tough question, and there's no it's more opinionated just based on what you've seen so far. There's no way to know if he can get better without seeing it. So it's a tough question, I know.
There's some fundamental flaws that he has in his game. And he doesn't, again, his fundamentals, to go to that word again, his mechanics aren't great anyway. They never have been great. He relied on a lot of, it's just kind of awkward or unorthodox, if you will. At times I could tell that with, I thought Stanley tried real hard with his mechanics, and I thought Petrus tried real hard, and Petrus wasn't always, his feet weren't set, but he also had an arm and he could overcome that. And even though he was not accurate either, but I think with Cade, and then you start to go and let's analyze the situation for what it is. He wasn't good last year in the first 4 games. Now he was hurt. There was an excuse / factor. He had a quad tear in what we all saw on Kids Day last year, and that affected him. And then he had an ACL. So it was kind of like the year before, he got to play in 3 games. He started 1, and then it went to JJ McCarthy. And then he had surgery after 3 games. The year before, when he was the starting quarterback and split some time, but had the primary amount of time, Michigan had a machine, man. I mean, they were not quarterback driven. And once they got into the playoff against Georgia, you could see why that was the case. That they had, Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. They had some really good receivers, Roman Wilson and the like. And
a great line.
and the Joe Moore award-winning line, and a fantastic defense with David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson. So all he had to do was make sure the trains run on time, at which he pretty much did. He's not even doing that now. That's the problem. That's what, when you go back to that, and if you're Kirk, you're thinking, well, if nothing else, he could get us into position, make the makeables, and maybe he's not going to be first team all Big Ten, but he's not going to do anything to hurt us. Well, this is hurting you now. 27 yards over the final 3 quarters. You're averaging 9 yards a quarter passing. That's not even a first down. So you're 5 of 18. Now Iowa State's got a decent secondary, no doubt, but they got really good safeties, and they did a nice job of covering Iowa's players. But he just didn't elevate that team. So I think at this point you start to wonder: is he shot? Or was the 21 season just a figment of having great players around him, and he was just kind of there steering the ship, if you will? And in the last 2 years, because of the injuries, he's just never been able to really get back to even that level. You've got to ask yourself those questions. Now, he answered some of that in the second half against Illinois State, but that's an FCS team. He answered that in the first quarter against Iowa State. That was a really good quarter. The last 3 quarters, which are winning time, they're not paying you to go 5 of 18. They're paying you to win trophies. And this was a trophy game, and against an opponent that will hold you over your head for the next calendar year. So I think this is Kirk's got to ask himself all those questions. And the thing is, the more he digs in and the more you don't get the answer you want, the longer it's going to be, and the more contemptuous the fan base will get. And because, again, maybe with Cade, they still win 24-10 in Minnesota, but then they go to Ohio State, lose 41-10. That ruins your playoff shot.
Yeah.
At 10-2, you're going to have a lot of 10-2 teams competing for that spot, and you can be out of it.
Yeah, no question. And, I think it's, there've been seasons before, past seasons. A lot of times it's how your schedule sets up. And for Iowa, as we talked about at the top, they just don't have to, it just doesn't have time to wait right now. It has to make the right decisions here. And that's not easy. I'm not saying it's an easy decision, but I don't see the downside, but I do see the upside in playing Brendan Sullivan this week. Meaningful reps. I'm with you. First half, second quarter reps, and just see what you have. You should beat this team anyway. Get a better idea of what you have. What does this guy look like in a game situation, in a new offense? And at least on the surface, looks like he could be a better fit for what they want to do. And that's, again, I don't think Cade should just be benched. That's not what I'm saying. Has circumstances of trying to get back to where he was. Continue to let him do that, but be committed to the team concept of getting the backup in there, and like we've said, and giving him some work, and then make your decision based on that. I mean, sometimes, people freaked out. Some people freaked out when Harbaugh did what he did with McCarthy and McNamara at the beginning of would have been the 2022 season.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked out pretty well in Ann Arbor.
Yes. And, and again, neither one of us are saying Brendan Sullivan is JJ McCarthy. That's right, for sure. But I think what we were trying to say is the best quarterback should lead this team. And I'm not, and I don't know that either one of them's an NFL guy by any stretch, but
neither one of them JJ McCarthy.
No. Yeah. I don't see any of them, making all conference teams or anything like that, but they've got to find a way to put somebody in there who's more advantageous. And as you said, with Brendan Sullivan, he has really good running ability. And when you're running zone read and RPOs, that comes in handy. That's a good thing. And he seems to be fairly accurate, as his numbers suggest, on shorter throws. Those are the makeables. And based on what we've seen with Cade, he's not very accurate down the field right now. And all those things are adding up. And you've got to be you've got to put yourself in a position where you're going to have the most success you can have. And I think right now, the best thing they can do is again, do that, make it official, make it tell us in advance, maybe whether it's leaking it on the sideline before the game. Hey, just to let you know, we're going to
give it to the TV people.
Yeah, exactly.
FS1 guys. Is Spencer Tillman and somebody else. I can't remember who the play-by-play guy is, but just give it to the TV when you sit down for meetings with them late this week. Just, hey, this is what we're doing at quarterback.
Yeah. So that way it's like, all right, it's not oh my God, he's not in there. What's going on? And, and tell Cade, this doesn't matter if you're 8 for 8 or if you're 3 for 8. We're just going to go with this plan. We need to get him some game action. This is a time we think we can take advantage of it because, the opponent they're facing, as you said, kind of at the top. This is not Troy from last year, who was really good in a lot of different areas. They have a new coach who, has also been, Jared Parker. He was the interim at Purdue in 2016 when, after Iowa shelled Purdue, they fired Daryl Hazel and they brought him in. He was been at West Virginia. He's been at Notre Dame. Now he's at Troy. And that's where Tim Lester was headed if he didn't come here. So this is not your typical team. They got blown out last week by Memphis. Memphis is a decent team. This is a game where you feel like it's a slump buster for everybody. And I think you got to make it work for you. And if they can't, or if Cade doesn't show it, if this is like a 14-28 performance and they decide to let him run through middle of the fourth quarter, there's going to be more angst built up about this than, since we've seen since, I don't know, last year when you had the Deacon Hill experiment. And then the problem is, Rob, and this is something I've tweeted out lately, when we start looking at all these quarterbacks, which ones have panned out? None of them for a long time. I mean, I know this is a different topic, but, like last year, it's like, why not give Joe Labus a chance? And first week, he was great. Last week, he threw 5 interceptions. Deuce Hogan is the backup now in New Mexico State. Carson May can't even get on the field at Abilene Christian. You look at, Spencer's out at Utah. He's hurt, but on and on. Deacon Hill's at Utah Tech. They got beat 72-14 last week. So what are they doing, in recruiting quarterbacks? I mean, they're not.
We talked about the recruiting, the development, and Kirk knows way more football than any of us, but the thought of making his son the quarterback coach to me that was a bridge too far for me. I'm like, I cannot in my head rationalize why this is a good idea. And it played out, but it's not like, boy, that's a surprise when it played out the way it did. It would have been a surprise if it played out the other way, if he was really good at it.
Exactly. We all knew it. It was just like, how? And I remember when it happened, I was actually on my way to the combine. I was driving and I see that was when Ken O'Keefe had retired and Abdul Hodge, and that's when it got announced he was going to be the tight ends coach and that Brian Ferentz was going to work with quarterbacks. And I'm like, and so I ended up stopping at a Starbucks and writing a column just saying they're doubling down on something that makes no sense to double down on. There's no reason for this. They need to change. They don't need the same. And now you have somebody who's trying to coach quarterbacks who's just, that's not in his element. And the results are the results. So I'm not blaming Tim Lester for any of that. Now I will on his play calling and the goal line. That's well deserved, but he's trying to untangle this mess. And it's like if you put like three of your sets of earbuds in your pocket and you throw them in the wash and the dryer, and then you try to untangle them.
I've done that.
Yeah, me too. Well, there's one, but it still sucks. You just don't have, it takes time. You can't just say it's, here it is. So that's where they are at quarterback. And I don't know, ever since they picked Spence and Spencer had all the things except accuracy and footwork. Yeah. otherwise he would fit, but they picked him over Zach Wilson. They didn't really do anything with Trey Lance, and here they are.
Yeah, and yeah, I wouldn't have thought when Nate Stanley left in 2019 we'd still be talking about poor quarterback play here, but here we are, and that's a good time to take a break because it's bringing me down, man.
Yeah,
this conversation is bringing me down. So we're gonna take take a break here and come back and talk something other than quarterback. All right. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the great work they've been doing in this community for over half a century. Let's hear from a few more sponsors now. Scott and I'll be back on the other side to talk some more football. Hang tight. And we're back on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa City can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. We also have a new sponsor, Scott. I don't have a lot on this. They're working on a script or I hope an audio file because I'm a dork and butcher these reads a lot of times. But it's Fanatics Furniture, and it's the script is very brief. Hardcore Hawk fans gotta have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or at Nick, that's KNICK 3615 at gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or Nick, KNICK 3615 at gmail.com. And then lastly, we are still waiting on our Black Angel script or audio file. Black Angel restaurant here in Iowa City, another sponsor. Scott is a proponent of the Black Angel, a fan, and good food there, Scott, as you know. Yeah. Tell the folks what they can get at Black Angel.
I had the awesome corn tacos, and they had all kinds of different kinds of tacos, but then also burgers and sandwiches. And it's right there. Actually, it's on Dodge. I got the streets wrong before. I drove past it the other day and I went, all right, now I know which one it is by the College Green Park or whatever. So tremendous place, tremendous food, good ambiance. There's been some restaurants there, but I think this one might last. In fact, my daughter and I, we ate there, and then we went to go see the Black Angel over at the cemetery nearby, and kind of started thinking about different things she could do for a graphic novel for it. So nice. We're plotting.
Inspirational.
So, yes. So we got some inspirational tacos, and and away we went.
Perez Brothers run that. You may have heard Perez Tacos, El Banditos, same owners. Great food. Check it out. Black Angel, downtown Iowa City. All right, Scott. Appreciate all of our sponsors helping us bring you these podcasts. And we're going to dive back in here. Talked a little bit about the defense earlier, Scott. As you said, you can't be perfect all the time. We knew the Iowa offense was going to have to lift some weight this year in a big game, and it didn't do that the other day. Defense couldn't win the day, couldn't shut Iowa State down. Iowa State made some plays. It's got a good quarterback. It's got two NFL receivers. It used them to its advantage, kind of built through the day to what it wanted to do, got them done in crunch time, and made plays. And you got to tip your cap. The defense will be okay. I would be shocked if this was a regular occurrence where the defense is giving up big, giant chunk plays throughout the whole season. I just don't see it happen.
The way they're built is to stop the run and give up big chunk plays, and they found a way. They were fine against the run, but they gave up a couple of big chunk plays. One a 75-yard touchdown pass, and one a 30-yard gain in the final seconds that would turn costly and turn into a field goal. So those are plays that are aberrations in my view. When you look at
still had to hit a freaking
54-yarder,
54-yard field goal.
Exactly. So there's a lot there that you've got to that they've got to be able to do to win that game. And Iowa screwed up in a couple of areas. Obviously, we all saw it, and I think in some ways, particularly with the last sequence, I don't like to criticize Phil because he's the best in the business. This was one where you could be critical of and say maybe you should have had 3 deep coverage instead of 2. Now I know it's more of a prevent defense, and they say, oh, all it does is prevent you from winning. Well, if you keep giving up 15-yard passes, you're with 30 some odd seconds left and then 20 some odd seconds left, you will be more survivable than giving up one 30-yarder. And Jalen Knoll on Sebastian Castro running a wheel route is not advantageous to Sebastian Castro. If you
as good as he is. Exactly.
Keep him in the flat. Have somebody deep, have a corner deep, because and maybe even have him deep if you want. Yeah. But to put him in that position of man coverage while he's running a route like that is very difficult because they're both NFL guys. And so I do think Phil did not have the right defense in place for that situation. If there is one area, though, Rob, that I am a little concerned about with Iowa that I think that they've got to figure something out in, it's getting a little bit more of an edge rush. I don't know that they're quite there yet. Whether it's, on their third down package, do they need to bring in – we talked about this before. Do they need to bring in a different rusher, somebody faster, somebody quicker who can get some burst? And I do think that needs to be addressed because Deontay Craig is a really good defensive end. I think same thing with Ethan Hurkett, Max Llewellyn, and Brian Allen. But in their packages, I think they need somebody who can, whether it's a linebacker or an extra end, they just need somebody who can really get to the quarterback or disrupt the quarterback.
Yeah, because Iowa State was smart. They did not let Aaron Graves get off. They were going to make sure he and Yahweh were contained, and then they could kind of stretch out the edge guys, and they did a good job of that, and found a way to take advantage of that. And but again, Iowa State had to make some really, really good plays, and they still needed to hit a 54-yard field goal at the end there to even get a chance, to even get to 20 points. So, I think there are some areas where you want to see growth on this Iowa defense, but if history is any indication, we will see that growth, and the defense will not be the problem as this season goes on. It will be on offense. The one thing, if we're coming out of that game, Scott, is strong safety. Cone Entringer got in there early in that game before the big play happened on Xavier Wongpa. It's interesting to see what they do there. Because you got Castro too, who could go back there, and then maybe Nestor goes to Cash. I'm not saying replace guys. It's one play. But obviously they were seeing something there to give Cone playing time early. So something's going on there. I'm not sure anybody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. And talking to Cohen the other day, and, first of all, what we're referencing, the 75-yard touchdown pass. And Jalen Knoll and Jay Higgins owns some small blame to this, and he accepted it. He's like, my fault. And that is, he didn't give a reroute off the line of scrimmage to, again, an NFL receiver who's able to get not rerouted, able to run unencumbered past a safety And Xavier Wampa needed to be deeper. You in that position and in that defense, you need to be deeper than the deepest receiver. And he wasn't even close. And it's like he took a couple steps forward, then all of a sudden, oh, bleep, there he goes. And then you can't just go from 0 to 100 the way, with Noel having.
I will say that happened to Bob Sanders in the Outback Bowl. So it can happen to the really good ones too. But
sure.
Again, they're seeing something there that they want to get Cone Entringer in the game.
Yeah. And so then they brought Cohen in. I talked to him this week. He said he is not running with first team. He's running second team.
Too, yep.
So, but that doesn't mean he's not going to play. In some ways, this is terrible the other day. And so I'm not dismissing it. In the big picture for this position group, it's not the worst thing that could have happened, which is everybody knows Xavier Wampa is a really good player. And Xavier Wampa is going to be a really good pro. There's no doubt in my mind. He made a mistake, and it was a significant mistake, and he got replaced for it. And Iowa did the same thing against David Bell and Purdue in 19, I want to say, when Matt Hankins was getting schooled, and they brought in Riley Moss off the bench.
Yep.
And Riley went in and had a great game, defended him. I think he had an interception. The next week they went to Matt Hankins again. So there is a precedent. And sometimes that is the one position where you let your confidence wane, they'll kill you. They'll eat you alive. So it's not the worst thing to say, hey, let's get him out there and let him play. And then next week we'll come back. And
there was some of that with Miles Taylor. Wasn't there a period there where he was struggling and they kind of juggled things, and then he ended up coming back in and getting better?
This is Jake Gervais.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was that time period.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah. Jake started the season, then he got beat out. I think it was Amani Hooker who got him or leaped him. And then he went back in and became a really awesome, very good starter, and played for 4 years in the NFL. And, now he's selling real estate in Austin, Texas. But, it's just that happens. But you've got to be prepared for it in that position. So when you look big picture, Rob, beyond this year, getting Cohen Entringer in the game in important situations and letting him play and experience it, next year he might be lining up with Xavier, or maybe it's Zach Lutmer with him and Xavier's at a different position. Something like that. It's going to happen. So in some respects, it's not the worst thing in the world to get him out there. But, and this is a teachable moment for Xavier Wampa. He'll never do that again. That against Iowa State, you saw the ferocity in which he played. He wanted to win that game in the worst way, and because there were 6 Southeast Polk players on the field, or at least on rosters, and 4 of them were for Iowa State. He wanted to win that game, and he cost them a major play. And so he'll never forget that. And, and he still played special teams. So it wasn't like he got completely yanked, but at that position, it's like, you got to keep your head in the game. And Castro has enough flexibility where he can play just about anywhere. If you want to put him at true corner, I'd say, well, you guys know what you're doing.
Yeah. After the play at the end of the game last week, we may not want to see Sebastian run an outside corner, but I wouldn't put it against him being able to do it either. So, but yeah, just something to keep an eye on there. Again, we're kind of picking nits here with this defense because that's kind of what you have to do. I think be fine. I think the defense will be fine moving forward. We'll see at Ohio State. It's hard to be fine against that Buckeyes, no matter what type of defense you have. But it's just kind of a feel or vibe right now, Scott, in around Hawkeye football, that it just feels like something simmering here. Like this next little stretch here is really going to say a lot about this season. And almost feels like people are kind of waiting to see how this plays out the next, I think it's reasonable to expect a win of some sort this week, but then it's really, what can you do with your season? Those, 2 of the next 3 weeks with the bye weeks stuck in the middle there.
Yeah. I think, this game should be non-competitive, frankly. It should be, I remember when Middle Tennessee State came to Iowa, like in 18 or 19, and it was like 48-3, and it was just an absolute domination. It feels like it has that potential here. They need to work on some things. This is an opponent where you can do that. And Troy has a good program, great tradition at that level.
There's a lot of guys on that team have won a lot of games.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say a lot of guys because they've lost a lot, but there are guys on their team that know how to win, that have won a lot of games. That know. I was listening to one of the receivers this week in the press conference, just talking about letting the younger guys know. And the head coach Parker talked about this too, Jared Parker, about preparing for Kinnick Stadium and what they're getting themselves into. Because this is obviously a unique opportunity for a Sun Belt team to play here. And, they were talking about just being calm and being able to stay in the moment. And they do have some experience that may help them do that. But at the end of the day, do you have enough players to compete?
Yeah, and they've lost so many in the portal. Last week, both their quarterback and their center were hurt, and they're playing with walk-ons at those positions. You can't even imagine to try to do that against this defense. I mean, YA Black against a walk-on center. Come on. There's Iowa scout teams better than that. So
those guys are probable. They did say those guys are probable to be back this week. The quarterback, and is it Fritz, the center, or Fitz or something?
Yeah,
it's one Fitz, of those. I think. I think Fitz is supposed to be back this week, which is good news for the Trojans.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. but either way, even if he's just sort of healthy, even if he was perfect against NFL defensive tackles, that's not easy, and the quarterback's name's Goose. So I'm always like, where's Maverick, old for us old dudes in Top Gun wars, but this is truly a game. I mean, they have given up a lot of rushing yards. And if there has been a positive, and it's been a major positive for Iowa, it's the way that they have been able to run the football both last 2 weeks. I mean, they had explosive runs the other day. They've altered their zone to where they're running more mid-zone than outside zone. And it makes a lot of sense when you have a guy like Caleb Johnson, because he's a long strider, but you don't want him to get – so I think in the past when they were running outside zone, they just couldn't get to their aiming points, and there was too much, the backside linebackers were getting there too quickly. Now they can really hit it. It used to be called off tackle. So like, and now that's kind of where they are. And the zone is enabling the guards to get to the second level much quicker. And then when you have a big physical back like that, who's able to explode when he gets in the hole, and he is kind of running a little bit more behind his pads than he has in the past, I think he's a bona fide star waiting to happen. And the only thing that keeps him under 200 yards on Saturday is letting everybody else play. Let's put it that way.
Yes. And Liddell Betts referred to that a little bit the other day. He needed a break at some point.
Yeah.
I wonder if this was a little psychological approach to Caleb putting Kamari, and not to take away anything from Kamari, but I think we've been in agreement the last few years that you just see the potential and the natural ability of Caleb Johnson, and you're like, this is the most gifted back on this team. And then we see LaShawn Williams play ahead of him a little bit, and then we come into the season with Kamari Moulton jumping him on the depth chart. And then we hear Liddell talk about how much Caleb is finishing runs in practice and going hard. And I think that's just what they wanted to see from him from the beginning, is for him to finish runs, go hard in practice like you will in games. Obviously, we're not going to beat you down and kill you in practice, but when we're live and we want to see you finish a run. Sounds like he's doing all the things on non-Saturdays to be ready for Saturdays, and we're seeing the finished product. And it's kind of been cool to see kind of the development and them building him up to where he is now, where he sometimes, I think, wonders, I don't think Caleb understands how good he can be.
Yeah, you're right. He's gotten by with it on natural ability. Yeah. And I'm not talking about, not busting ass in the weight room. I'm just saying that, really channeling the film sessions and seeing it and absorbing the words that Liddell gives him, because Liddell played for a long time in the NFL, very good running back. And you could just see it. It's like, just break through that wall. You're 80% of the way there. You've got more natural ability than what most running backs we've seen here. I mean, in a long time. Tyler Goodson had a lot of natural ability, too, and he's on an NFL roster. But he has a different kind of natural ability that's all there. I just don't. I think a lot of it's been mental with him. Not putting, just not getting himself mentally prepared in all the areas of life, let alone football. And now, whether it's the wake up call of getting suspended for the first half of the season opener, or seeing, wow, Kamari Moulton's starting over me, LaShawn Williams has been starting over me. I'm a junior now. I'm not going to reach my level, my potential if I just continue to do this. Well, now we're seeing it. If he puts forth that effort, he's in that same conversation with a lot of really great running backs in the Big Ten. He's, and it's a great league for running backs, but he's in that conversation if he plays like that.
Yeah, no question. And credit to the kid. Could have left. Somebody would have taken him in a heartbeat out of the transfer portal, but he stayed, committed to this process. The coaches stayed committed to him and continued to pound the message of be prepared, practice hard, play hard, all those things. Give it your all. You're so good. If you play as hard as you can, you're going to be better than most of the competition on Saturdays, on most weeks. So do that. And it makes everybody better. And it's just cool to see. And they've got a deep running back position. Like Scott said, I think the receivers have taken a step forward. Tight ends, we know how good they are. The offensive line has been good. Just got to get the quarterback play figured out. That's a big, big thing, but it needs to be figured out for this team to reach its potential. And
I'd be remiss if we didn't mention some of the schematic failures of the other day in the red zone, particularly inside the 3-yard line and inside. Probably the most head-scratching play I've seen in a long time, this includes even Brian Ferentz's OC, was the 1st and goal at the 1 to open the second quarter. Iowa went with 14 personnel, 4 tight ends, Hayden Large, whatever, he's a tight end for the most part. In that situation, it's almost exclusive. You better punch them in the mouth or you better play action pass. It's one of the two. And instead, they tried and this is schematic, they tried a blocking scheme where Dominic Orange, who's about a 320-pound badass defensive tackle.
And they recruited him, so they should know who he is.
Yeah, exactly. He's right there. They tried to block down with Johnny Pescuzzi, and then they had a reverse pivot. It was like they're trying to false influence him a little bit. But when you're in at the 1-yard line, it's basically one gap and go. You have no time to play around. If you're a defensive tackle, it's just, not see the block, power play, none of that. And he just threw him off like he was a glove that he had on his hand or something, and then just crushes Kamari Moulton for a 3-yard loss. And it's like sneak, straight up inside zone, no reverse pivot, or play action pass to the flat, touchdown to one of the tight ends.
Yep.
That's what you do. Instead, playing around. And then the next play was kind of that reverse to TJ Washington, and it lost a yard. And you're just like, you went from 1st and goal at the 1 to 3rd and goal at the 5. And again, kind of gimmicky plays. And my thought was then, and it is now, your regular offense took you down the field. You've got you run pretty much exclusively 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. Spread them out. They're geared up for the inside runs, and you ran a delayed run that cost you. Just run your regular offense. It's good. And then the 3rd time when they're in there, right after Iowa State scored its first touchdown, they went right down the field, and then they just kept it in the regular formations, personnel groupings. Caleb Johnson runs like 3 yards off tackle, touchdown. They've got to stick to that because those were extremely costly. I mean, at the time, I'm like, man, this could come back to bite them. 2 field goals when you're inside the 3 The other one was Jay Higgins' interception, and yet to get 3 points and against a team like that with Rocco Becht, the last 3 quarters, 266 yards passing, the last 3 quarters. That's almost 10 times more than Cade McNamara had through the air.
Yeah, Iowa wins that game going away with Rocco.
Yeah. So, I mean, it should be set, if a minimum, if it's 17-0, they have a really hard time coming back. But last year they came back and had the ball down a touchdown. I mean, this is the way these games are. And I could tell that Kirk was upset after the game about it. And I could tell he was still upset talking about it on Tuesday. So it's not something that's lost upon him, but still, ultimately that comes back to Tim Lester trying to be too cute in my eyes. He just score, just get points, move on, and instead, you lose by 1 point. Everything is under a microscope. Every play call, every deviation is under a microscope.
Yeah, it magnifies. When you play the game in the margins, when you play the games that are going to be, last part of the fourth quarter, last 6 minutes of the game, all of those decisions you made it up to that point that, going for 2, chasing points, things like that, those get magnified. When you win, people tend to forget about them. When you lose, you get 2 knuckleheads in their 50s on a podcast talking about this is what could have been better. The good thing is, Scott, I think this is still a pretty good football team with a chance to do some things, to still reach its goals. But as we've said throughout this podcast, there's no time to waste. Decisions need to be made now. Development and progress needs to happen now. And we're going to have an answer here within the next several weeks where this season is headed in terms of, can Iowa reach its ultimate goals? Yeah. And that's really where we're at.
For sure. We wouldn't spend an hour talking about all these little issues if we didn't think that they were good. They are good. They are a good team. They have potential to be a very good team, and they still have playoff potential. But we also see that the key word to me is this whole season has been urgency.
Yep.
Don't take a step back, and be comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, that includes making some strong decisions. And I think with this team, if quarterback can at least get to a modest level, I'm not saying mediocre, but make the makeables. The open receivers there, hit the open receiver. Don't throw the ball in when a guy, don't call that play first of all. And second of all, don't throw the ball the way he threw it on that interception, because at that juncture in the game, Rob, they kicked off to Iowa State. Iowa State got a penalty on the kickoff. They didn't get a first down. They punted. Iowa has the ball at the 42-yard line early in the third quarter, 13-0. And again, there's your opportunity. Go punch them in the face. Go score. They're not coming back from that. Instead, you gave them life because you threw what basically turned out to be Luke Lachey dragging across the field, then going up the sideline, and Iowa State's.
I think with the way Luke's spot, I think he was surprised Cade threw the ball.
Yeah,
he was like, "Is he really throwing this to me?"
And it was so badly underthrown.
No, he had no chance.
You're always taught to throw the ball in the least likely spot to be intercepted. And he threw it in the most likely spot to be intercepted. Underthrown with a corner kind of, not even really on coverage there. So, those are opportunities and they failed. And that's something that's going to stick with them. This was, there was a lot of talk about 2002 the other day. I also say there's a lot of talk you can have about 2010 with Wisconsin, which was a lot of opportunities there that blew it and it went down the other way for the season. So I think you got to be cognizant of both. They've got to, they do a good job. They've done a great job in the past of fighting through adversity and getting, and moving forward and getting through this stuff. But all the players have to be in the same situation. And that especially includes quarterback. Because if you can't, 5-18 in the final 3 quarters, it's not going to get it done.
No, it is not. It could this week against Troy. We'll find out. I think they're going to, and I don't want to be pile on Troy because, again, it's been a really, really good program. It's just in transition right now, and Iowa's catching it at the right
Yeah.
time, I think. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens on Saturday. I think style points are going to be important. If Iowa squeaks out like a touchdown win, that's not going to be good. Iowa needs to make progress here, to take a step forward, to come out of that game feeling good heading to Minneapolis. And we'll see. Saturday, 3:00, FS1, Kinnick Stadium. Check out HawkeyeSports.com. If it's your first game or you're looking for information on what you need to do on game day, how you get in, where to park, things like that, HawkeyeSports.com. Hit the game day tab. Get all that information for you. 3:00 Saturday, FS1. Scott, let's get to the picks.
I figured you'd want to after last week. Rob had a great week, guys. He was 10-5. So I was 8-7. Rob is up by 1, 17-16.
I'm going to enjoy this while it lasts, folks.
Yes, he's up through 2 weeks, and I'm down. I have 16-17, so down 1 game and lost last week by 2 after we both had really tough first weeks.
That's saying the sun even shines on a dog's ass some days.
Yeah, but the sun's been shining a lot, Rob, lately, So I guess we got to sit in the sunshine. So I'll go ahead and go through these games here. And by the way, in case you're ever wondering, I write them all down and I save them. So that way, if, hey, you screwed me that 1 week, I have them right here.
You can screw me. I won't know.
The first one is Mr. Joey Labus, Central Michigan at Illinois, who pulled off a real nice win the other day. Illinois is favored by 20 points. Rob, what say you?
That's Central, right?
Yeah, Central Michigan.
Central. I'm not. I think Illinois is a grinder team, and that's Bielema's, personality, and I think they can grind out wins. I don't see them beating teams by this many points, even a directional Michigan school. So I'm going to take the points in this one.
All right, I am going to take Illinois because Joey Labus threw 5 interceptions last week.
I know.
And sometimes that has a factor in,
Yes.
in
It
Illinois.
could be a carryover effect.
Yeah. He threw a lot of interceptions in practice too. By the way, that was part of why he didn't play. Second one, and this is interesting when you start talking about point spreads. Arkansas State at Michigan. Michigan minus 23.5.
I'm going to take Arkansas State here as well. One of those programs that some people, I think, unless you really follow college football, you're not aware. It's a good program, Arkansas State, and that's a lot of points for a Michigan team that has fallen off, obviously, considerably.
Yeah, I'm going to take Arkansas State as well. Last week was a significant loss. Now I think Michigan will win the game.
Oh yeah,
but I think this could be like 28-20 or something like that, or 24-14. Not by 24 points. So I'm not a real up on that one. Alabama at Wisconsin. Bama minus 15.5 on the road at Camp Randall, and I'm still going to take Bama.
I'm with you.
I haven't seen enough out of Wisconsin, especially first 2 weeks, to say, yeah, they can handle this. This isn't the same Wisconsin team we saw 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
Not sure what Wisconsin's identity is right now. Yeah. We always knew all those years we knew what Wisconsin was. I don't know what they are now.
Either. And, they've changed their identity with Phil Longo as their OC, want to go air raid. The thing is, this is what helps Iowa, big picture in my eyes, is when you leave that vacuum, you leave it open and somebody has to fill it. And Iowa still knows what it is and it fills it. And if that can get them 2 extra players in the Chicagoland like it did this year, every year that helps you down the road. So this one is probably the biggest blowout maybe of the week. Prairie View at Michigan State. Michigan State giving up 33.5. I still like the Spartans to cover on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback you here because I know nothing about Prairie View. But I was impressed with Michigan State last week, so I'll go with the Spartans.
That was a nice win for them at against Maryland because that was a week where I expected Maryland to probably win. Michigan State's still rebuilding, and yet
Yep.
they were able to pull that out. And I thought that was really impressive. Nevada at Minnesota. Minnesota minus 14 and a half. The hook is hurtful on this. But I'm going to still take the Gophers to cover. I don't know that it's going to be that close.
I'm with you. I will take the Gophers. I believe, didn't Troy lose to Nevada to start the season? 28-25, something like that?
Yeah, it was like 28-26, something like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, give me the favorite there.
The mighty Gophers. All right. Now we get the first of the in-state rivalries. Oregon at Oregon State. Oregon minus 16 and a half. I'm really thoroughly confused about Oregon right now.
I am too. I'm in my head right now. I'm thinking, what is Oregon this year? You know?
Yeah. I mean, they won by 10 against Idaho, and then they won by field goal against Boise State. And now they're playing Oregon State, which we know is going to be over the moon charged up for this game from the Pac-2 that's now the Pac-6 for another, maybe
hoping to be the Pac-8.
Yeah, exactly. Return back to the 70s there. And yet Oregon, we've known all along, was supposed to be good, but they're not. I'm gonna have a little faith in them. I think they pull through. This is a rivalry game. They understand the stakes. I'm gonna go with the Ducks, and you throw the 16 and a half, but this is what I'm watching closely.
Give me the Beavers in Corvallis.
All right.
If it was in Autzen, I definitely would go the other way, and I'm sure the points would be different, but this could be a hornet's nest for Oregon.
Yeah, you might be right. All right. Notre Dame at Purdue, another old rivalry game. Notre Dame minus 10 and a half. They haven't played in West Lafayette in 10 years. They used to play every year for like 60, 70 years. This is a tough one because Purdue didn't play last week. Purdue won 49-0 in week 1.
Notre Dame played last week.
Notre Dame did play last week.
Congrats to your former Hawkeye Gavin Williams, by the way.
Yes.
Who's at Northern Illinois.
Yeah. Had a good game and a lot of controversy there. I'm going to go with Purdue. I don't like the hook on that.
What's the spread?
10.5.
Purdue's getting, I assume.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Notre Dame minus 10.5.
And it's in West Lafayette. Yeah. I'm gonna roll with the Boilermakers there.
Yeah. I think this could be like 34-24. So the hook could come into a play here. All right, this one is as fascinating as it gets to me, and that's Washington versus Washington State. They're playing in the Seahawks Stadium in Seattle.
Okay.
Washington is a 4.5-point favorite, but however, I'm going with Washington State. They had a nice win last week. I think it was against Texas Tech by 3 touchdowns, and again, I think they give me the points and give me I'd probably pick them to win outright.
I'm going to go against you, and I'm going to take the Huskies. I'm going Big Ten here. I think Washington's been better than I thought they would. I don't think I would have picked this way early in the season, before the season, but I think I'm going to go with the Huskies here, and being as it's kind of a home game.
Yeah, it's in Seattle, so
yeah,
I guess it would be like Iowa playing at Iowa State at Liberty.
Yeah. Let's get that together.
Yeah, I think that'll be a nice little game there. UNI at Nebraska. Nebraska minus 28.5. And I'm convinced it's going to be like 40-14, but I'm still going to just close my eyes and pick Nebraska because after UNI struggled with St. Thomas, a non-scholarship FCS, I'm not so, I expect Nebraska to have a little bit of a letdown, but I also think that they're way better than Northern Iowa.
I'm with you. I'll take the Huskers.
All right. Eastern Illinois at Northwestern. Northwestern minus 35. And this was a team I think Illinois beat. Eastern Illinois got beat at Illinois by 45. New quarterback for Northwestern. I'm going to go with Eastern Illinois. I mean, I think Northwestern wins big, but 35 is a lot for me.
It is a lot, but I'll throw them.
Okay. NU. I'll put NU because the other one's NEB to me, no matter how much they whine about it. All right, here's another great old rivalry. Maryland at Virginia. Maryland -3. Give me the Cavaliers, who came back and had a nice win.
Yep, I will go with Virginia as well. That was a disappointing loss by Maryland last week. Lost some faith in the Terps.
Yes, they went all Terrapin, like they tend to from time to time. All right, Indiana returns to the Rose Bowl for the first time since January 1st, 1968. They're playing at UCLA. UCLA's first home game, first Big Ten banner on the Rose Bowl, all the way around. Give me, even though it's -3 on the Hoosiers, I'm going to take Indiana. I think they're a pretty good team.
I do.
Crushed my alma mater.
I do too. Give me Indiana here. I think it could be a long season in Westwood.
I agree. I think people are going to be looking to basketball season like last week.
Yes.
Indiana, by the way, 77 points and 700 plus yards against my alma mater. Records for them.
It's like the old Randall L days.
Yeah, it was like one of the city schools in Iowa City playing a 1A and a mediocre 1A at that, because my team is not good. They've lost 26 in a row. So yeah, it's they're asking me if I still have eligibility, and I told them I'll think about it. Finally, Troy at Iowa. Iowa -22.5. Is that still the number you have?
That's the last one I saw. I haven't looked, I don't think, since Wednesday though. So, but that sounds right. I don't think there's been much movement on that line all week.
Yeah. I'm taking Iowa. I think Iowa comes in and really lays the wood to Troy. And Troy's, again, they're a good program, and they're going to rebound, and they're going to have a nice, I don't know about year, but they're going to get better. It's just, this is a tough one for them in the stage that they're in. If this would have been last year, first of all, that wouldn't have been 22.5, but last year might have been a fairly close game, but I just don't see it this way this year. So I'm throwing 22.5.
I will do the same. I'll throw the 22.5, and I see the way Trey plays the rush, and I see how Iowa's run the ball, and that's not a good combination for the visitors. Yeah. And then you think about Iowa's defense and Troy trying to move the ball on them, and I can see this being similar to Illinois State in terms of final score, in that 40-point type, 35-42, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's kind of where I see it too. That it's, if I was to pick one, I remember, again, it was like I think it was Middle Tennessee State, which was kind of in a similar situation and stage. Decent program, lost a lot of guys, came to Kinnick, got beat like 48-3. And Iowa ran for like 300 plus yards. And then they went and lost to Michigan 10-3 the next week. But I could see this being like 45-3, just a domination from, first series on, and everybody's going to feel the feel good factor will come in. And then, then you start to play it out, because then you play your oldest rival next week.
Yeah, big week, get right game for Iowa. And it's not just get right in terms of winning, but they have a lot to figure out this week. If you're looking for importance in this game beyond it, and you're like, Troy, I don't care, just look at the different things that Scott and I talked about today, just the different areas: quarterback play, edge rush, strong safety, different areas that this is still early in the season that we're still kind of watching as things develop, and keep an eye on those too. And we'll see. You'll get a better idea of maybe what this week might mean for the rest of the season if you look beyond just the score and look at kind of some factors and things that we talked about. So anything else, Scott? Anything else going on? Scott's staying home this week. He's going to watch TV during the game.
I know. How did I get that lucky gig, right? Yeah. So I've
bathroom's close.
Yeah, that's true. The line's not as long, and I guess I'm going to miss out on all the extra sandwiches in the press box after the fact.
Zilla's happy because you're home to protect the
Yeah.
cat because you never know who's going to eat your pet.
Yes, I was lucky enough to keep him in. He didn't want to go out in his catio the other day when I was writing, so he was whining the whole time. Like he was scared somebody was going.
Animals know, man.
Yeah.
They have instincts. They know.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
we're going to get off that quick before we get ourselves in trouble. All right, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast, the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Thanks so much to our sponsors. Appreciate the guys in the chat room. Glad you guys had a Hawkeye conversation today. Scott and I'll be back next week, probably Thursday, but you never know. Sometimes breaking news will alter our day, but most of the times it's Thursday or Friday. And next week we'll get to talk about Floyd. We all look forward to that. So come back and join us and have a good weekend. Enjoy the game, and we will